Hello and welcome to the Xenothesis podcast. This is episode 22, in which we're covering chapters 5 and 6 from part 4 Training Floor of Book 1 Dawn of Octavia Butler's Xenogenesis trilogy. I'm Richard Acton, and I'm joined as always by my co-host,
Michael Glinkham. Hi everyone.
Hello, Michael. So
we're getting close to the end of the book, and it's...
Yes.
Man, it's getting... I mean... How do you even say? Like, the last time we had the predictions about... I said there's like the raising of the flags, and it's just... And... Man... I'm heartbroken, to be honest. But I knew that something like... what happened was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of saw it coming. It felt like it was building to this kind of a dramatic crescendo, but it still hits you.
Yeah, it's just like the only reasonable person that was out of all of them. Literally, it's. But I guess I don't want to spoil it yet.
Well.
By the time people will listen, but hopefully they read the book or read the chapters and they know what happened. But yeah, I do feel sorry for Lilith. The whole situation.
Very much so. Yeah, yeah. I mean, her entire situation throughout this book, to be honest, is not one to be envied.
No, honestly, like that's, and it just what really hits the worst, like, is the fact that later on in the chapter when Lilith and Nikanj have this conversation about the whole situation, and Nikanj says this was unplanned, and at that point I feel like if I was in Lilith's position, I would probably stab him. Like, this whole situation was... I mean, they were lucky that she didn't have any weapons on hand, because my goodness, it felt like the Oankali haven't learned anything from what they observed in the jail room. But yeah.
Well, yeah, so we may be getting ahead of ourselves as usual.
Yes,
so let's,
as usual. So maybe let's start with the predictions and then...
Sure. So
I thought that in chapter 5, we will actually meet Kurt's group, right? Like, it's... I thought that the chapter, there won't be any sort of in-between chapters. They will straight, while they're traveling, they will get ambushed, I would say. I thought they would be ambushed by Kurt, but I was one chapter too early.
Yep, well, it's pretty close, though.
I'm pretty close.
Then we can give you that one.
Yeah. A bit ahead of time, but hey. So, the chapter 5 summary. So the chapter starts with the description of the area that Lilith and the group were walking alongside the river, and it sort of starts with the description of the upriver as the oldest part of the island, that as the book describes. And it says here in the book, this land had once been connected to the mainland, had become first peninsula, then an island, as the river changed course and cut through the connecting neck of the land. Or that was what was supposed to have happened. That was the Oankali illusion. Or was it an illusion? It seems that, Lilith is still questioning, even she's questioning herself now, even though she has been in this room before. So...
Yeah, it's like she's seen the rest of the ship. She knows what she knows it's kind of a space inside the ship, but it's still so compelling. I found quite a good little clip of the formation of an Oxbow lake as satellite imagery, sort of time-lapsed over time to show what this actually looks like if you're having trouble visualizing it.
Yeah, I saw this video before. It's really... I remember back in primary school when we taught about this sort of natural changes of the environment because of the river flow. And this is pretty perfect of what I imagine it to be. But in case of the Lilith, it's more like... It literally is like a ring of river around the... around in Center Island where they're all located, right?
I think so, yeah. I think there's a full ring of river, and then I think it's still kind of flowing partially around the this loop. It's not sort of a fully separated off lake yet. So there's kind of an intermediate stage where it has this property.
It's a really nice time lapse. We'll put the link to this in the description for help people visualizing it. But yeah, so Lilith basically was questioning herself more and more as they walked through alongside the roof, and although she knew that she wouldn't get lost because Nikanj and she walked around the chamber several times, it was the first time for her in this particular area. And then so basically the situation, as they were walking, Lilith realized that it's getting actually quite late, so she suggested that they should camp out for the night, and because it was going to rain as well, they should prepare some a shelter, and then in the morning they could start building the boat to traverse the river. But then that's when she catches herself that she took charge again, to which Gabriel immediately tells her that they don't take orders from her. But when asked what does he want to do, sleep in the mud, for example, because if they continue walking, they won't have time to build anything, and they won't be able to see anything. Gabriel responds that he wants to find orders, and that's when Lilith just sort of is like, oh, okay. But she insists on building that shelter because, then she can find the rest of the people who left the camp before them, because she cannot get lost and will always remember her way. And then the group argues sort of back and forth, mentioning that they're tired and mosquitoes are relentless, and then Lilith say that this is gonna get even worse because at night there won't be any Oankali to protect them. So basically, they will basically be eaten alive at night.
Yeah, not a fly repellent.
No, exactly. There's literally no chance, no mesh or anything to protect themselves. So, but it seems that idea of being protected by those Oankali, like for people like Tate or Gabriel, they say they will stand it. Stand the those mosquitoes. They don't mind, and prompting Lilith to wonder if they hated the Oankali, Kahguyaht in the case of Tate and Gabriel, so much, And I wouldn't be surprised. Kahguyaht is an ass, so I feel like although he had, although I need to say, in the jail room when Kahguyaht approached Tate and Gabriel, he was much more different to what it was towards Lilith. So I guess maybe wasn't that bad, but still.
Yeah, it seemed to have a slightly different attitude towards them. I think, maybe it was because it was attracted to them, and Lilith was kind of intended for Nikanj. So I don't know, but it's I mean, Lilith continues to have her sort of disagreements with Kahguyaht, and
I guess
I think we share the kind of
honestly,
enmity that's there.
Yeah, absolutely. I just find it funny that it's, you get to hate someone through even though you've never met them, right? And we sort of Lilith's impression of Kahguyaht and the general kind of, maybe they just couldn't stand Kahguyaht. That explains why in particular there. It's not like a general aversion to the fact that they're an alien entity. It's just that Kahguyaht's a bit of a dick. So. Yes, basically. So yeah.
I mean, she's right about camping, right? And this is the kind of
absolutely.
They resist initially just because it's her idea, as it were. But it's like,
but she's right. Like
you need to make camp.
Yeah. Like especially if you have no idea where you are, and like it's better to still use whatever available sun there is to at least make some sort of protection for yourself. It's not like
pitching a tent when it's dark and wet is not fun.
Oh no, absolutely. And it sounds from you have experience, and I do have experience as well in this circumstances like that. So yeah, it's not fun.
I mean, the main not fun arises later when you're cold and wet and you can't get anything dry again. I mean, it's not so bad in in somewhere where it's hot, I suppose, because it's always wet and it's always hot
Yeah.
in a rainforest type environment. But
when it's wet
still.
and cold, that's really
that's not fun either.
Yeah, especially
But,
you know, like you thought that you lay down the tent in somewhere like proper and then you know like some elevated area, and then suddenly you wake up middle of the night and your sleeping bag has soaked in because that elevated area actually is fact not so elevated, and water is basically dripping into like forming a puddle underneath and it's just soaking through. It's just like, oh.
That sounds like it comes from experience.
Oh god, so many times. Especially it's just for because I went to the Polish version of the Woodstock Festival, right? And that's organized every year in the summer. And there was usually you arrive in early in the morning, like by the train, but you know, like there was one time where we arrived a bit earlier in the evening, and we walked into the area where it was supposed to take place, and it was just dark, and you put a tent out, and we found a nice place over in the hill. But the hill was okay. There was a hill, but the top of the hill was actually a dent in, like it was lower than we expected, and it started raining like hell at night, and it's just it was not a great experience, I would say.
Yeah. I think in the jungle, just being kind of like off the ground and to some degree away from the various animal and insect life that's trying to eat you.
But yeah, I mean, you know,
it's the main priority.
You know, it's just like the one thing back in Poland, you get these like we call them, I don't know what the English name of them, but we call them blacksmith ants. They're like big as your thumbnail, right?
Oof.
And they're like the workers, they don't bite but they sting, while the workers have these massive like jaws that like when you bite you literally have to rip them off your fingers, and they make these like sort of massive ant nests like made of like those, you know, needles from the like spruce or something, right? And you can tell what that these are ant colonies because they're obvious, like you cannot miss them. And honestly, just walking into, like, if you step on that, they swarm you in a second. And you know, this is like one of the gentler like type of ants that you could meet compared to like you could find in Amazon forest, right? So I just cannot imagine, like, you know, waking up in the pain, you know, being surrounded by ants, just like, ugh, horrifying.
Yeah. So my dad went to a trip caving in Belize a while back, and he described this thing where a colony of ants kind of had a migration while they were there, and so they had this. They were like staying in a house, and the ants just like this big kind of swarm of ants just kind of like marched through this house and like cleaned out everything. So they just like wander through the kitchen, and they just like go over all the stuff, and as they went through, they just like killed off and carried out anything that was in there. So like if they had some cockroaches and some other bugs and stuff around, but the ants just like
wiped
killed
out
and carried like everything, right? So they just like anything that was in the way of the ants were just like removed, and then the ants just kept, you know, just when they were moving on, they just left, and no bugs remaining afterwards because they'd just eaten everything.
Wow.
So.
I mean, I've heard stories like that. Was it like fire ants or something? Like the ones, what's the name of those?
I'm not sure.
I remember watching a documentary about similar something, and actually in the documentary itself, they were talking about those type of ants that like the journalist was like, yeah, we were camping in this small house, and then, like, you know, our guide woke us up to leave the house because there's an ant colony walking through it as we're speaking. So they grabbed everything what they could, left the house, and they're just watching this swarm of ants walking through. And the best part is, that was the first night after the ants went away. That was the first night they could really sleep properly because there was no insects whatsoever around the area. Yeah. Like area within like several meters around the house was completely wiped out of any living creatures. And it's just like, wow. Yep.
I mean, the ants are a pretty top dog when it comes to sort of insect predation, right? When they're acting as a whole colony, they're just pretty unstoppable.
It's
even us humans basically just have to get out of the way and wait for them to go away.
no, honestly, it's pretty crazy, and it's interesting because recently Kahguyaht has been making some series about ants, right? And they talked about in South America, I think, there are these massive super ant colonies that basically took over almost the whole continent. Like it's crazy. And a continent like country, I don't remember, but like it's just so massive that basically it spans over several hundred kilometers in width, right? There's just like, and I just cannot imagine like this trillions upon trillions of ants just walking through the land, just basically anything that's alive just running away.
Yeah. So the eusocial insects, so ants, termites, and bees are like, I can't remember exactly what the numbers are, but they make up some ridiculous combined portion of the world's total biomass, right?
Oh, I can imagine that's true.
There's so many of them, and they're incredibly successful as a kind of approach. Right? Those big colonies of insects, they're
but it makes sense, right? Because there are like the animals that are led by hive mind, right? So they're working for the common good, right? So
well, I mean, it's not really like a hive mind as such, right? It's just it's kind of an emergent set of behaviors from individual level stuff, right? It's not like
but the end
shared
result
consciousness.
But the end result is basically every ant is working for whatever it, whatever things it was born into, right? And not that I'm promoting this in human society, because it would never work, but it just makes sense that they are so successful because they just this ant does this, this ant does this, and like they all work together.
Like in bees, for example, like the different specialties are at different points in the life cycle. So like I can't remember what the like sequencing is, but they do a different job as they get older.
Oh, really? Okay.
So it's not like apart from a couple of specialists like the queen and so on, but they go through different they just sort of like take turns doing the different roles, as it were, as they go through the different stages of development.
I thought it depended on like what they were fed as the larvae, because I thought that was what's determined whether they were like the gods or whether they were like just a working bee.
I think that might be the case in some. I can't remember which species. I think it varies by species quite a lot.
Okay.
But I know there are at least some that have this kind of sequencing thing. But the feeding thing definitely is involved in like the royal jelly fed to the queen to create the the queens. Yeah.
Interesting.
But yeah, they have really interesting genetics and epigenetics because of this whole weird haploid thing that they do. There's a bunch of different variants on it, depending on the different ant and bee colonies. But yeah, there's a lot of really fascinating biology and like behavioral stuff that you can get from understanding the like emergent properties of ant colonies and things like termites. Like their whole, like they have this whole like the pattern that they build their colonies in effectively produces like a natural air conditioning system.
I've heard of that. Yes.
Yeah, it's this whole like airflow and heat exchange pattern. It's just a kind of a like evolved architecture. It's
no, I've heard of that. That's it's honestly it's pretty incredible. And then ants, growing fungus. They have like chambers where they grow fungus to feed themselves, like basically agriculture and. And for example, I love the fact that bees have this method of communication where they like sort of vibrate and walk in this like method, like around, and they're like sending this like sort of almost like a Morse code
like dance.
It's pretty incredible. Honestly, the behavioral studies on insects is just incredible, and love listening to it. But at the same time, went off the tangent.
Yep. Okay, so
let's go back.
There are bugs in the rainforest.
Yes, there's bugs in the forest, and they have to keep an eye on that. So Lilith, for that reason, goes around the area to check if there's any ant colonies or anywhere around, if it's safe to camp around the area they were, and gave them all the ideas, tells every individual in the group what to do, what they need to do. But she warns them not to go out from this area because it's really easy to get lost, easier than they think. And then Gabriel says to her, "But you are so good. you can't get lost. To which Lilith responds, it has nothing to do with being good. She has eidetic memory, and that's why she can't get lost. But he doesn't believe her.
Yeah, and it's not an unreasonable skepticism, because I think, as we discussed when she first kind of acquired this capability, like the sort of eidetic memory that you see on TV, where people just have like a photographic representation of whatever they've seen in their head, is not really a thing. And what she has is kind of clearly superhuman.
Yeah.
And even if it were, even if you had a perfect photographic memory, it wouldn't necessarily like entail perfect spatial reasoning ability with respect to that memory. So like navigating is still not necessarily going to be, I mean, you'd recognize stuff, but it might not be.
Exactly. Especially in the jungle, I can imagine like, plants almost being the same everywhere. It's remembering all the different patterns that they've grown into. Like, I think that'll be pretty, I mean, I don't know, like I just cannot imagine being that accurate. Yeah,
and the whole idea of kind of having a photographic memory doesn't really make sense with the way our visual system works anyway, because like
we look for patterns.
Most of what, and also just like this, if you look at like the raw output from your retina as like a represented image, as a representation of what it actually looks like, it's crap, right? It's not even remotely like HD crisp images, right? Yeah. You've got like a tiny spot in the middle that's like vaguely well resolved, and the rest of it's just kind of like a
blurry
fuzzy
mess.
Black and white impression of movement. Yeah. And what we actually experience as what we're seeing is largely just interpolation by the brain. It's not really.
You know what interesting what I've read recently about the visual system is that you can sort of hack it in inverted commas, I would say. But basically, if you make yourself read a book upside down, right? And you just continue doing it for a while. After, some time, some people experience faster, some people slower. Your brain will automatically swap the text upside down.
Yeah.
So basically, you can still read and you'll read. But then if you try to read other book normally, your brain will have to still take time to accommodate to that jam. Your brain basically makes sure that everything is the way it should be. Because obviously our eyesight is like inversed, so it's pretty incredible.
They did this whole there was a whole set of experiments where they gave people glasses that just vertically inverted their visual field. And they had the same thing. Like initially they were just completely confused by it, and then after a little while it just sort of clicked, and then once they took them off they had the same like process of adaptation to go back again. So it's very, very strange.
It's a natural high. But yeah, the chapter continues then with them building the shelter. Basically, it's just a roof under which they can hide, put hammocks and spread mats and to protect them, all the group, against the rain. And as the chapter goes on, the group having a meal. I think it was just corn, and realizing how unsatisfactory it was, Liv suggests that they could fish tomorrow, even though they don't have any fishing equipment. Like she used spears, but Ray suggests maybe bows and arrows could work, but and during the conversation, like Tate says, like Will's fish, but like there's something like strange chemistry between like Ray and Tate, and it seems that Lilith was like a bit confused about like what's going on, like as if something was wrong between them. So it seems to be there seems to be something wrong in the group itself as well.
Yeah, we get kind of the beginning of there's a sort of tension between the couples. They're not quite gelling as they were before.
Yeah. But honestly, I mean, like, I really admire people who like can do the fishing with like using spears, because like honestly, whatever you see in the water is usually like completely in the wrong position to where where it actually is.
Apparently that is like the main challenge with bow and spear fishing, is just being able to kind of it's another one of those like perceptual things, right? You have to kind of just get good at handling the fact that you've got this refraction that's giving you an illusion of the fish being in a very different place. So you have to like aim as I was looking this up to see what the degree of adjustment is, apparently for like lateral distance between you and the target, it's like you adjust about 4 inches down for every 10 feet of lateral distance.
So it's like 10 centimeters in for what, every 3 meters?
Thereabouts, more like 2.5-ish, I think. Yeah, so I used imperial because I don't know. I can do both, but I'm really bad at translating between the two when it comes to actually just doing the numbers. But I can intuit the distance in either. But most people.
Sorry for interrupting you. It's just
at least in
I can't work with feet and inches at all. So I need to always convert myself.
Yeah. I should have written down the metric ones as well because I can't do them in my head.
No, it's fine. So you were saying in lateral 4 inches for every 10 feet, and what about depth?
And then for depth, you like for every like perceived foot of depth, you add like 3 inches.
Oh, okay.
So you basically have to aim low and then like even lower, in order to be actually hitting it in the right spot.
Okay. Well, next time when I try to catch fish with my bare hands, I'll try to, like in Mulan, just, the animated series, just like when they're trying to catch fish with their own hands, then I'll try to do that.
Yeah. I think that might be why the spearfishing is perhaps initially a little easier, because you're generally doing it from slightly closer up. So there's slightly less distortion to correct for on the lateral distance, whereas if you're trying to shoot a bow, you're probably going to be going it from slightly further away.
Yeah, you have to really know how to adjust the distance. Because usually, spear fishing is done like in the very shallow water, so the distortion is just almost minimal, isn't it?
It is what it is, but I think it's just the reason it's done in shallow waters, I suppose, is probably more for the practical consideration of how far can you get the spear and how easy it is to see the fish.
Yeah.
And for them to be near the surface and so on.
But anyway.
Yeah.
It sounds it's good. I will have to remember these values. I convert them later in centimeters.
Yeah, that's just ripped from the Wikipedia page on bowfishing. So
okay, I see.
They had them there in metric units as well.
Okay, brilliant. So back in the chapter, we're told that when it started to rain, everybody started putting hammocks, mats, etc. And Lilith put hers beside Joseph, and they lie down. And then, as a couple, she tried to touch Joseph, but he immediately drew away. Like the touch felt wrong, repelling. And Lilith then realized that before Nikinj appeared, there was no problem with them touching. But since then, something was wrong. Like she went and grabbed Joseph's hand again, held it. And in the book it says as following: he tried to jerk away reflexively. Then he seemed to realize something was wrong. He held her hand for a long, increasingly uncomfortable moment. Finally, it was she who drew away, shuddering with revulsion and relief. And that's where the chapter ends. And it's really weird, isn't it? So it means that the Oankali, the prison of Oankali, it wasn't just that initial, how do you call it, attraction that they have to stay away from every otherwise they literally physically could die. It seems that it actually stays after, even between them. They need the Oankali in between them to actually do anything. Yeah,
it seems like the sort of repulsion that like imprinting on the Uloi gives you for other people outside of that like trio.
But then again, Lilith and Joseph are close.
So I think once you remove the Uloi from the trio, then they seem to be repelled from one another. I think that's how it works. I think it's the the Uloi is needed in order for them to not be repelled by one another. It kind of creates the bond. And it also sort of, I think, explains why everybody was so on edge so far. It just feels to me that maybe that they can't touch each other, and that's what causes the tension increase. Yeah, we got that little bit of foreshadowing with Ray and Tate being like uncomfortable around one another.
Yeah.
And I think it's like the absence of the Uloi is starting to crop up in their relationships with one another.
Yeah,
it made me think that is this because I can see why in the humans, right? If the humans were Well, I mean, supposedly they're chemically not able to reproduce because of something the Uloi have done to them.
Mm-hmm.
But I could see why, like, if they didn't want human-only kids, it would make sense to have this kind of like repulsion existing between them when they're not, when the Uloi are not present to kind of mediate that process. But I was kind of wondering if this is a feature of the other Oankali, right? If the male and female Oankali are also affected by this when the Uloi they're paired with or mated with in their trios. Yeah.
Good point. I wonder if it's I don't know. Wasn't there a chat in one of the chapters suggested that the male and female will not have sex without the Uloi?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they don't. But I was just wondering if they have the same kind of
reaction.
I don't know if I'd have to look back and closely examine some of the earlier chapters where we see the Oankali interactions.
Yeah.
When Lilith's living with them, to see if this is hinted at anywhere in there. But
I think the presence of Uloi is necessary for reproduction, but I don't know if the male and female actually, do anything without.
Yeah, I think it seems like it's an adaptation to this kind of trade thing they do, right? Because they need to stop ordinarily or like two-sex reproducing species from doing their normal two sexes reproduction, right? They want to insert their Uloi intermediary in there. So I think it kind of makes sense as like an adaptation to let them do that.
Yeah. So yeah, it seems that but it's interesting that it's also happening to Lilith and Joe, because it feels to me like, considering the fact that they've been together before, but who knows? Maybe that's the contraceptive that Nikanji was talking about.
Maybe it's not even a physical one as such.
Maybe that's the idea of like just even physical interaction without the Oankali is just that's the contraceptive for them.
Yeah, that feels like even more of an invasive thing to do to people when it's kind of these two had like a sense of intimacy before,
and now they don't.
And now they've kind of taken it away from them. It sucks. Yeah, and that kind of discordant note that they end on there is like this kind of the last. It's the last interaction between Joe and Lilith at the end of this chapter.
Oh God, yes, it is. I'd never actually thought about it this way.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds. Yeah. Yeah. So this is what the chapter 6 prediction comes in, because I said that basically this is where Kurt finds them, right? And where he finds them, it means that there's something wrong is gonna happen, and this is, as you said, this is the last interaction with Lilith and Joe. Wow. Oh man, that's really is a bad.
Yeah, it's a really sad note.
Yeah, it's a sad note. So in chapter 6, the next morning, as I mentioned, Kurt actually finds their shelter, and Lilith gets startled, and she knowing there's something wrong. And that's when she sits up and sees Victor and Gregory near Joseph. She's like, "Oh, okay, wow, they found us. So then next we can build the ship together." But then she sees Kurt, and the first thing he does is hit her in the head with the flat side of the machete across her face, and that stuns her a bit. And then she hears the commotion, Joseph standing up fighting, and then he hits her again. But then that's when she loses consciousness.
So we don't really get much of
what happened,
the confrontation between those groups. It's just kind of Lilith wakes up and is pretty rapidly knocked unconscious.
Yeah, and then when she finally comes to her senses, she finds herself completely alone in the shelter, and the one that she helped build for the group, Gabriel's group. And then she tried to sort of follow their steps, but she didn't really learn any on tracking, so she loses them after some time. And thinking about Joseph, hoping he was fine, although thinking that nothing before happened between Joe and Kurt, like in the jail, but in that cell room. But who knew what would happen now? And even though Nikanj was telling her that this whole, that Joseph has enemies, but never would, she would think that it could be Kurt.
Yeah, I mean, they hadn't had a confrontation as such before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Lilith then decides that it's better to just collect the little things they left her and go back to the settlement, but to find Nikanj. And this is what book says. If only Nikanj were still here, perhaps it could spy on the human camp without the humans knowing, without fighting. Then if Joseph was there, he could be freed, if he wanted to be. Would he want it? Or would he choose to stay with the others who were trying to do the thing she had always wanted them to do, learn and run. Learn to live in the country, then lose themselves in it, go beyond the reach of the Oankali. Learn to touch one another as human beings again. And as she started to walk, she heard sound behind her, and then she saw the several Oloi emerging from the water, recognizing Nikanj and Kahguyaht. It's basically like a submarine just walking. So they can breathe underwater. I think that was established before, wasn't it?
I think we did establish that before. Yeah, they had some aquatic ancestors or aquatic trade partners not all that long ago. I think was the
so they could breathe underwater
implication. Yeah. But it's in that the passage you read there. We got kind of the call back to the humans touching one another as humans again.
Yeah.
And I think this is probably the most explicit we've had Lilith like thinking about this is what she had planned to do. Yeah. Right? Because she'd been, it had kind of been implied that she was thinking, we'll handle the training, we'll put up with this whole situation until we're in a better spot to actually do something to pull ourselves away from them. Right?
Yeah.
So just sort of to knuckle under until they had something that they might actually be able to get some success with, because at the moment they had like no leverage. They're completely in the power of the Oankali. So
it's
they didn't really have any other strategy.
Yeah, it's the long-term planning, right? So it's the idea was that what Lilith was trying to convey to all those idiots that were in the cell. It's just like watch and observe, and then when there's an opportunity, you can take it. But it seems that nobody really listened to her, and then they still did what she was planning, but they did in the wrong place. On the ship.
Yeah. Still on the ship.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, once Nikanj and Kahguyaht emerged from the water, she asked them, they know where they are going, to which Nikanj says yes. But when asked about Joseph, it didn't respond, frightening Lilith. And as they were walking towards Kurt camp, the Oloi suddenly stopped near a gigantic tree. Sort of covering her view and almost making Lilith walking to them, because she was walking fast with them, and Nikanj then jumped over and told her to wait until it was good, and Kahguyaht tells her that she should go while the other Oloi wait. That's better. And then once she was called, she climbs over and she saw Joseph, and he was attacked with an axe, and basically we were told that his head was severed from his neck. The hatred that someone must have felt for him. Kurt? She demanded of Nikanj. Was it Kurt? It was us, Nikanj said very softly. After a time, she managed to turn from the grisly corpse and face Nikanj. What? Us, Nikanj repeated. We wanted to keep him safe, you and I. He was slightly injured and unconscious when they took him away. He fought for you. But his injuries healed. Kurt saw the flesh healing. He believed Joe wasn't human. Why didn't you help him? She screamed. She had begun to cry. She turned again to see the horrible wounds and did not understand how she could even look at Joseph's body so mutilated, dead. And it's just wow.
Yeah, it's such a the irony of it being the fact that he healed, which they tried to do to protect him, that kind of set Kurt off and got him so like scared, and that he hacked his head off.
I thought that this whole healing process would be like, if you break a bone, instead of taking like 3 weeks to heal, it would be like, I don't know, a week or something, right? If you have a cut, the bleeding would stop, but like it would only heal after a day or something. Right, but like not something that visibly, like I don't know, you see in science fiction movies where basically the enemies hit and suddenly like their face just reforms perfectly, like in Terminator, for example. What was it?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it was. I mean, it's not quite like it occurs in like real time in a short period of time.
Yeah, I thought it was more of like, gentle sort of like, processes taking place, but faster, but not in like, wow, it is immediately molding again into a.
Yeah, I mean, it clearly has some limits, but it sounds like it's kind of like just noticeably faster than an ordinary person would heal, like enough that you'd notice.
Yeah, it's just I'm not surprised that would set off someone, because I mean most people are not used to seeing like bodies and some gruesome things, but then we all know, like, when we hit ourselves or hurt ourselves, it takes forever for anything to heal. But when you see something immediately happening, it's like, yeah, this is something wrong. It seems like, yeah, I can imagine the person, like people around Joseph freaking out.
Yeah, and the sort of the paranoia that they already had around kind of Lilith being some kind of a changeling or something like that.
Yes.
The whole sort of seen some of what the aliens can do in manipulating biology and growing all the walls and stuff. So being kind of freaked out about the fact that someone who you thought was human was healing in a way that was clearly not human.
Yeah,
would I could see how that would be disturbing.
And then Lilith asks, Nikanj, why was she alive? Considering she was the enemy number one, because she was even more different than Joseph. But Nikanj thought that Kurt didn't mean to kill anyone. Joseph injured Kurt when he hit her, and when he saw Joseph healing, he screamed. And in the book it says, screamed like he'd never heard anyone screaming before, and attacked him. And Nikanj then proceeded to explain that whatever happened there, it was out of their predictions and plans. It wasn't planned. So it just feels to me like, okay, they were allowing those humans to leave and everything, but it's just so, I don't know, like animals, like watching animals.
Yeah. I say it feels like the Oankali, like they're not being kind of judgmental of the humans in this scenario. They're not sort of ascribing responsibility to Kurt in any meaningful sense. They just sort of it does feel almost like how humans talk and think about zoo animals, right? If a zoo animal kills another zoo animal, they're like, oh, it's just kind of sad, and the failure is like on us as the keepers. But there's this kind of weird, like the Uloi are kind of, and the Oankali are kind of, they're also intelligent, and they know that the humans are intelligent. We're kind of closer in competencies than like humans are to zoo animals. So they still have a sort of slight condescension, but it's not quite as. It's a slightly different dynamic to like us and chimps. Leaves you in kind of a weird place.
Yeah, it just feels to me like. But it feels to me, right, this similar situation, like, I think humans would react the same if, for example, when we finally, like, in, I don't know, several hundred years, we managed to conquer the interstellar travel, right? And then we land on if we find some other planet, and then we find, let's say, some primitive beings, like, similar to, what our ancestors were, right? I think it would be the same. We would treat them like, immediately there would be like, this idea of like treating them like animals, right? They're not as intelligent as us, so we are clearly superior. And then obviously there'll be exploitation of them, probably slavery, and then there'll be groups on Earth going, rights for those beings, let's say, and then it's going to be like. Basically any sci-fi movie, like starting from Avatar and going all the way back to any sci-fi movie that has ever existed, right?
Yeah, it is a fairly common trope.
But it's honestly, it's when you think about it, it's all those movies, all of their science fiction, like they are so close to what humans will do. Like there will always be those people who feel uncomfortable about this, and there'll be those who just don't give a crap about it, and like they're given orders, or they just simply don't care because those beings are not as intelligent as they are, or whatever edge we have over them, we'll use it and show this that we're superior. It's just like, yeah. But the moment it happens to us, is like, oh no.
Yeah, when we see something more intelligent than us, yeah. I mean, there's is it, I think the Uplift saga, I think, where it's kind of like the inverse, where we take or various like civilizations take a civilization that's kind of lower down on the rung and like try and raise them up. Like I think we start like uplifting dolphins or something in that saga. Make more intelligent dolphins.
Okay.
It's kind of
it's just
an interesting take on
this
that
whole situation. Is like, I don't know, the author really showed that if the roles were reversed, we would be doing the same thing.
Yeah,
I'm 100% sure. It'd be like, honestly, 100% like this.
But actually, I think it would have been really interesting to see what the interactions between humans, Homo sapiens, and Neanderthals were, because we interacted with them. They were probably on a very similar level of intelligence to us. We interbred with them, and yet they died out. So,
I can tell you a bit more about this because actually, in fact, I have read about this fact, and basically what happened was we committed a whole planet genocide on them. That's what happened, right? They were stronger, physically stronger than us, but we were more societal beings. Like, as in, like, we were a bit more intelligent, and we were working in groups, and that's what basically gave us the sort of edge over the Neanderthals, and we wiped them out. Like, it was both, like, it was basically a whole planet genocide.
Yeah. I think I'd heard some indication that it's kind of they may have been more like spatially intelligent in some sense, because they designed some interesting spears and stuff, and some implements for hunting. But then we were like more socially intelligent. Yes. We were better at kind of like the politics of banding together to wipe them out.
Basically, we do possess between 1 to 4% of Neanderthal DNA in our genome, but it shows that there was some interbreeding between the two species. But yeah, we completely wiped them out. There was it was just basically a whole planet, complete destruction of the species. It's just,
I think the last ones were in somewhere around the Strait of Gibraltar, I think.
Oh, really?
It was kind of the last enclave of the Neanderthals, if I'm remembering my history of that right.
Just shows what species we are. And doesn't matter what our technological advancement is, we will wipe out anything that's standing in our way.
Yeah. I think part of the reason it's so interesting is it would be it will be a really interesting kind of thing when we have interactions again, either with intelligences that we've created or intelligences that are alien, or something else that's kind of on our level but alien in some sense.
So I feel like it's going to be really this book is basically a guide of what's going to happen. Yeah. So let's go back, I guess, to the chapter. So Lilith, in her shock of what she was hearing, what she saw, just sat down on the ground, almost catatonic. But eventually, with not responding to Nikan, and the insects that were crawling over her, Nikan basically just lifts her up and waking up her from shock, and then suggests that they should pick the body. They will pick the body and then bury it on the earth. It touched her experimentally with a sensory arm. She glared at it, wanting desperately to be let alone. "No," it said softly. "No, I will not let you alone. I let you alone once. The two of you, thinking you could look after one another. I won't let you alone now." As Nikanja's arm wrapped around her neck, Lilith pleaded with him not to drag her, but she wanted to feel for Joseph, but Nikanj wanted to share her feelings, because Joseph was belonging to it as well as Lilith, and Lilith then asked Nikanj to share what it feels. And this is what the book goes. It touched her face in startling human gesture. "Move the 16th finger of your left strength hand," and said softly, "One more case of Oankali omniscience. We understand your feelings, eat your food, manipulate your genes, but we are too complex for you to understand." "Approximate," she demanded. "Trade. You're always talking about trading. Give me something of yourself."
Yeah. So I think Lilith is asking for Nikanj to share what it's feeling with her in the same way that it can perceive what she's feeling. She wants some reciprocity from it. But I think that it is a bit difficult to pass this move the 16th finger of your left strength hand thing that Nikanj says in response to her asking it to share the emotion. And I think the meaning of that is like, you're asking me to do something I can't do because like you don't have the right like anatomy
to perceive it
to do that thing.
Yeah,
it's not not something that you can understand or do because like you don't have a 16th finger or a strength arm.
Yeah. But then the other Uloi, when this conversation was happening, they focused back towards them and withdrew their bodies as if in embarrassment and anger. But Lilith didn't care. They only took and never gave, which is true, to be honest. And this is where the book describes, and it's the first time we sort of experience what the Oankali are experiencing. Nikanj pressed the bag on her neck with a sensory hand, warning pressure. It would give her something then. They stopped walking by mutual consent and faced one another. It gave her a new color, a totally alien, unique, nameless thing, half seen, half felt or tasted. A blaze of something frightening yet overwhelmingly compelling, extinguished. A half-known mystery, beautiful and complex, a deep, impossibly sensuous promise, broken, gone, dead. The forehead came back around her slowly and she realized she was still standing with Nikanj, facing it, her back to the waiting Uloi. That's all I can give you, Nikanj said. That's what I feel. I don't even know whether there are words in any human language to speak of it. So, this is the first time we actually experience, or we're told what the Oankali sort of experience. And it's incredible, isn't it? Like, you just think about, like, you see a new color, you can taste it. Like, it's like when people see sounds or hear colors, right? So there's this sort of
the synesthesia.
Yes, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's kind of a new qualia, as they say in like the philosophy of mind circles, right? A new kind of experience of a thing, an internal experience of a thing, like seeing a new color. That's quite a powerful thing to be able to like transmit to someone else.
I mean, you could have to sort of, I don't know, maybe connect, like Nikanj connected his vision to what she was seeing, but like, I don't know, it just feels like, I mean, we can, I would like to see what infrared or like ultraviolet feels like if we had the possibility to see those wavelengths of light.
When there's a new thing that we can perceive, we have to kind of invent a new internal state that represents that thing, right? Because like we know what it's like to see red, but we don't know what it's like to see in the infrared. So we'd have to, devise some new internal representation to experience it differently.
For me, infrared, just a conversation, I feel like infrared is, it's more of related to heat, right? So I think I think I found a YouTube video. We had this conversation before about the video, how do animals see, I think. And some other ways of vision, imagining how the vision would be like. If we saw an infrared, we could be able to see like the time in terms of why, for example, if somebody sat on the chair, we could see the heat signature of that person, there, like sort of like you could see the heat, at least on the materials that can preserve that infrared heat signature that would be there. And then
we discussed that before, right? Because it's got this whole it's not just a new internal sensation, but it has a whole set of implications for like how we act in the world.
Yes, exactly.
It brings that new temporal component to our perceptions.
We had this conversation before, yeah. And we know that like bees see in ultraviolet, and we've talked about it that they can they see like things that on flowers they have different colors and like have like guiding sort of lines or arrows even to show where the bee should land and stuff like that. So
yeah,
I think it'd be very interesting to see how it goes, how it be. But I think like infrared probably would be the more interesting one.
I think also even just like expanded sense of smell.
Oh
right?
yeah,
I mean when you look at like the complexity and sophistication of like a dog's sense of smell, right? I mean there's I think the comparison is like the surface area of the brain that's dedicated to smell perception in humans is something like the size of a postage stamp, and then for like a bloodhound or something it's like the size of a handkerchief.
yeah.
Right. There's clearly a whole enormous additional set of complexities to the qualia of experience that you can have associated with smells that we just don't have an analog for.
I guess things like this, would probably some new sensations would affect probably many senses that usually are not connected, right? When you think about like what the book just described, maybe you could see and taste something like that usually you shouldn't be able to taste. Like for example, you look at the flower, you can't taste it, but like when you look at it, the new color, you actually can taste that it stimulates your taste or something. So I guess those new sensations would be
that kind of synesthetic aspect of this perception that we have here. I think it's like an artifact of not having that sense natively,
yes,
as it were, right? So I mean, if you grow up with like the full range of the color spectrum from UV to infrared, then it would seem normal to you, and like you wouldn't have to resort to inventing something new to attach to the representation if it suddenly was added to your sensorium, right? It wouldn't be I think it would be less of this like weird hybrid of like taste or whatever, because it would be more familiar to you, right? You would have assigned kind of an internal representation to it earlier, so it would have been more like consistent with the rest of what you put together. So I think that might be part of like the difficulty translating that Nikanja's having.
When it's really cold, like super cold, you can taste the cold when you think about it. It's like super sharp and breathtaking, right? So it's like you can almost taste that coldness, right? And I think somebody like I saw a comment on Reddit, I think it was from Twitter conversation or something, that people were talking about like there's some sort of sensations like when it's super cold, you can almost taste it because it stimulates the nerves in your mouth, right? That usually are like responsible for the taste, right, or something. Same with the heat when it's super hot. You can feel it's almost like you can see the air like
it feels almost like a weight.
Yes, exactly. It feels
like
so. I can imagine those extra new sensations being like this. That basically there's those like in those cases of these extremes, we can almost like perceive them with all other senses because they stimulate them in one way or another. So I can imagine being like here and here as well, just sort of this type of sensations. Awesome.
Yeah, that's an interesting one to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so we see this kind of close interaction between Nikanja and Lilith immediately, following they're having kind of left Joe's body, and it seems like this may have driven a wedge between Lilith and the rest of humanity, right? I think she may be, this may have kind of shaken her affinity for humans a little bit, or shaken her faith in humanity just a touch, because
to be honest, I'm not surprised.
She seems
like,
yeah, it's unsurprising, but she does seem to be kind of turning to Nikanja a bit more for comfort in this moment.
To be honest, I'm surprised that she even does that. I mean, Nikanja finally did show her something that she never experienced before. Fair enough. But for me, it feels that this whole situation is... I mean, I wasn't expecting anything else from humanity. Like, generally, I have really low expectations, but honestly, this is like beyond what, but it was to be predicted. Like something had to happen, and whether to make, there had to be some twist in the book or something, obviously to keep people's attention to the book, but also in the fact that it's very likely that it would happen in humanity. There'll be most group that they can't think of anything longer than, beyond their noses. So they would just jump into things and just do stupid stuff like, going to the cupboard where the food was provided and thinking that like they will catch other humans or whatever, like as if they had any chance. And and the whole idea is just like, when there's so much evidence around you, and just the time for like, considering the fact that the Oankali didn't follow the humans at all, it's just like, it's a clear indication they know what we're doing. They're observing us all the time. This is not the time to be actually going independent. Although, you can try to be independent instead of learning, but fair enough. But like, it was obvious that this is not the point where you should be trying to go like Lilith wanting them to being just humans, right? And it just felt to me that like this whole attitude of that group of people was just they're just plain tools.
That's it.
Just
like Lilith was able to get some perspective on their situation, right? Because she had that time in the ship with the Oankali, kind of seeing their society, seeing their engineering, their this enormous ship that they lived in, seeing the Earth from the window. It was like she had the kind of outside view, right? The ability to step back and take the perspective and say, okay, right, we are utterly outmatched here, and nothing but the long game is going to be even remotely possible. But the rest of this group didn't have the same.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's giving them benefit of the doubt. Yeah, I agree. This is, but in the same time, when you have a alien, when you finally see an alien, I mean, that's pretty solid argument of being like, wow, okay.
Yeah, like it should probably have been enough to be able to step back and take that perspective. But I think that also, the fact that Lilith is able to have that perspective, and that it's one that she kind of has to share with the Oankali, right? That's their perspective as well. That is another thing that distances her from the rest of humanity. Right? She's been able to see the bigger picture, and they haven't yet.
Yeah. So I can imagine. Yeah, this is. I mean, always we have this conversation all the time, but I just feel like this whole situation could have been avoided if they did the same thing to the humans as they did with Lilith. Show them around, prepare them for the Earth, and then just make them accept what it is that they're experiencing.
Yeah, it does kind of feel like they're setting themselves up to fail in some sense. But I do wonder if perhaps maybe they don't have a good success rate with individuals the way Lilith was kind of able to like adapt to just living with them for a little bit. Right? I'm wondering if perhaps they do this group thing because a substantial number of people just don't manage to get as far as Lilith did. They don't manage to kind of live among the Oankali for long enough to get that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, well, let's see, because I guess the next chapters will explain to us what's the situation, Lilith's role in this whole.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you think that might be the fact that there's kind of this now greater wedge between Lilith and the rest of the humans because they've killed Joseph. As you said before, like the one person who seemed to be sharing her perspective on this, the one who was kind of level-headed and reasonable in this group. And do you think that her likely sort of alienation from the rest of the humans will be a problem for the Oankali's plans for Lilith, for her?
I think at this point, all the Oankali plans are out of the window. Like at this point, they've realized that whatever they were doing was a mistake. And because this is where the chapter ends, saying basically, Lilith realizing that Nikanja is also grieving in its own alien way, they all head out towards Kart's camp. And my prediction was, they reach the camp, there's a confrontation, and basically somebody's gonna be dying, and I think it's Kurt who's going to die. Simply because the fact is that Lilith is going to this whole situation, like the whole idea, Joseph dying, and obviously Lilith's gonna blame Kurt, and she's gonna get involved in this whole fight, and there's gonna be so I feel like this whole role, that all the plans are out of the window, and basically what's going to happen is that the perpetrator who, Kurt in this case, who did this, is going to be is going to die. The rest of them are gonna be probably sent on Earth, because they'll be just basically this experiment was not working. We're gonna show you around that you're indeed in a ship, and off you F off to the Earth, because that's where your place is. But I feel Lilith is not going to join them, because this whole idea, because when you think about it, this whole idea all this time, it was correct, right? She was correct. She was the one that adamant we on the ship and everything. And like, even though if Kurt is going to be gone, although I thought he was entirely, but people like Gabriel and the rest of the Kurt's team are going to blame Lilith for this whole situation, right? That maybe she's the cause of the aliens taking over. Lol, like as if it was her fault. But it could be. They will try to find, and then they finally on the Earth, they'll basically, I just imagine it like if Lilith goes on Earth with them, why would she help them in any way? For what all they did was basically alienate her and go against her, and basically at the end of the day, it's going to be basically all of them. Joseph died. What did Gabriel or Tate do? What the rest of the friends she had did to stop that? Right? So I feel at that point, like Lilith, I don't even think Lilith would want to go to Earth at that point. But who knows? I don't know. It feels to me I wouldn't want to have anything to do with those people.
Okay. Interesting prediction.
Because, I mean, it makes sense. Like, it's everything so far, it was against her. Everything, even though she's been showing that we are aliens, blah, blah, blah. They saw aliens, they still doubt her. They go, the chamber is pretty convincing they're on the Earth. But, like, they literally, from the description of the book, they walked in the corridor, right? So, like, to the chamber, like, okay. Do you see yourself anywhere, like, do you see any, like, a dome or something of alien, like, settlement or something? Like, I mean, I don't know if it's like a plot hole in the book or something, but just, okay. And then, but I expect that something is going to happen to Kurt. Like, there has to be some justice for Lilith. Justice for Lilith, that's what we want. Everyone, justice for Lilith.
Justice for Lilith, right. Okay, interesting. So I'll just note that next week we're going to be doing, I think, 2 chapters again, right? It's is it 7 and 8 at this point? Yeah, 7 and 8, and then I think 9 is the last one. So we'll do that on its own. And
then we do the summary of the what we've done so far.
We'll probably 9 will include like after we finish the last chapter, we'll do kind of a retrospective on the whole book, as it were.
Do you remember when we in the first episode we were talking like, we should keep an eye, like a spreadsheet of like how close was I with my predictions, how far away? We haven't done that at all.
No, we didn't. We really didn't keep track of that very well, did we?
Did not keep track of it. So I guess we'll just look into it and be like, well, I mean, overall, we can look about the general, because some of the themes that we were talking about repeated themselves over the few episodes, so we can sort of...
Listener engagement challenge. Right? Somebody go back through all the episodes and make a spreadsheet of Michael's predictions. No, so we don't have to.
So yeah, I guess we should have keep an eye on that. But yeah, I guess next time. No, to be honest, I think we just have to go through our notes and be like, what's the prediction, what the chapter said, and then be like, oh, actually, I was not that correct. So
I think you actually made some pretty good predictions over the course of the book. Yeah, I mean, occasionally your timing was a bit off, but a lot of the general points that you thought, something like this is going to happen, something like that did happen.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, yeah. When it comes to science books like this, right? Things, some like themes are often used, right? And this is just but let's leave it to the last episode of this book to discuss this, because I feel like I don't want to sound like I know anything, because the book can go to as often I said before, the book can really twist itself to the places where I wasn't expecting. So
yeah, we can sort of go back and talk about some of the overarching themes once we've actually finished the arc.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, okay then. I think that probably wraps us up.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
This week.
So thank you everyone for listening. We were Xenogenesis. You can find all the places we record. I always say this. All the places that we put the recordings are located in our website. And I could say that the recordings are on our website. Like, what's wrong with me? So anyway, thank you everyone for listening to us. I was Michael Glinka.
Yeah, find us everywhere podcasts are found. I was Richard Acton.
Bye.
Bye.